Okay, I get this question all the time. What is an appraisal gap? Your real estate agent might talk to you about using it in negotiations. When you're purchasing a home with mortgage financing, most of the time you're going to be required to get an appraisal. And appraisal is done by an unbiased third party to give a valuation of the property. So if you, I know this isn't realistic, but get an accepted offer at $100,000 and the appraised value comes in at $100,000, there's no gap in appraisal. The appraised value and the purchase price are the same. Got it? Awesome. So let's say you go under contract on that same $100,000 house and we order an appraisal and the value comes back at $80,000. Now there's a $20,000 gap between the purchase price and the appraised value. And I don't know how many times that I need to say it, but I'm going to say it again. The appraised value always has to match the purchase price. So when your agent is having you possibly negotiate covering an appraisal gap, what they mean is if the appraised value comes below the purchase price, then you would be willing to make up the difference of whatever dollar amount you're comfortable with between the appraised value and the purchase price. And that is what an appraisal gap is. So if you agree to an appraisal gap as part of your negotiations, does that mean you have to always bring more money to the closing table if the appraised value does not meet the purchase price? Not always. Let me explain how this works with some numbers. So again, let's take our unrealistic purchase price of $100,000 and say that's what our accepted offer is. And let's say that we agreed to a $20,000 appraisal gap. Again, round numbers. You don't have to agree to a specific number for an appraisal gap or agree to an appraisal gap at all. So if the purchase price is $100,000 and you agree to an appraisal gap of $20,000, then as long as the appraised value and the purchase price match, you don't have to change your loan setup at all. But let's say that your plan was to put 20% down on your $100,000 house. If a purchase price and appraisal match, you will do your 20%. That's $20,000, right? Now, let's say that the appraisal comes in lower, like my first example, at $80,000, and you've agreed to that $20,000 appraisal gap. What needs to happen is you need to talk to your loan officer first and foremost, but we may be able to restructure your loan so that way you don't have to bring that full $20,000 extra to the closing table. So what we could do is we could change the loan down payment from 20% down to 10% down. And if we do that, now you just need to bring a little different amount to closing. I gotta do some quick math on that one. That's 200. You could probably use some of this for some B-roll. Okay, if we take that example and your purchase price is $100,000, the home appraises at $80,000. You might think instead of bringing your 20% down of $20,000, now you have to bring $40,000 to closing. That would be the 20% down plus the $20,000 difference in the appraisal. However, you don't necessarily have to do 20% down to qualify for the loan. We could change your down payment to 10% down. So the numbers on this can get a little confusing, so stay with me for just a minute. If the purchase price is $100,000 and you appraise at $80,000, we could potentially change your loan to value to 10% down to 90 loan to value. That would make your loan amount $72,000. And instead of having to bring $40,000 to closing, you would need to bring $28,000 to closing. So there's only an $8,000 difference in your cash to close instead of that $20,000 difference that you thought you had to bring to the appraisal gap. Again, I know that this can get nuanced, confusing, there's a lot of math. So I'm just trying to help you understand the basics that just because you sign up for an appraisal gap does not mean that you necessarily have to bring more money to the closing table if you're not putting down the minimum. I just want you to remember, as an aside, if you do change your loan structure to say 10% down or 13% down to make up that appraisal gap difference, you are likely going to end up with something called PMI, or private mortgage insurance. Not always is it required, but it could add cost to your monthly payment. So if you do ultimately decide not to put more down to make up the gap and restructure your loan, your mortgage payment will likely be higher than you originally planned. So let's say that you did not sign up for an appraisal gap and your appraisal value comes in low. Let's use the same example. $100,000 purchase price, $80,000 appraisal. If you didn't sign up for an appraisal gap, you'll have 3 options on how to deal with this, 3-ish options. 1, you can decide to bring more money to closing or adjust your loan amount or loan to value like I showed you in the last example. 2, you could decide to negotiate with the seller to make up the difference in the $20,000 appraised value and purchase price. 3, you could ask the seller to cover the whole amount and lower their price, right? That would be really lucky. And then your last option, which often isn't successful, is disputing the appraisal by having your real estate agent and your loan officer put together a report to send in to the appraisal department. That third option doesn't work a lot of the times unless there's a major error on the appraisal. So if you did sign up for an appraisal gap, you don't really get those options. But if you didn't, then you do have those options to renegotiate if there is a lower appraised value than the purchase price. I hope this helps to explain a little bit about what happens with appraisals, loan to value. As always, if you have questions or you want to run through specific examples, please feel free to reach out. We're here to help. And this can get a little muddy, I know. So feel free, again, shoot us a message. We'll talk to you soon.